I am Hilary Collins, 29 years old from Ohio. The day they broke me wasn't loud. It didn't come with screaming or shattered glass. Just the quiet, casual cruelty of people who never thought I'd fight back. It started in the office break room. The fluorescent lights hummed above as I carried a tray of cupcakes, my small attempt at celebrating the company's sales milestone. I'd stayed up half the night baking them, icing each one with care. I wanted to be seen, not as the assistant, not as the quiet one, but as someone who mattered. As I set them on the table, laughter erupted from the other end of the room. My boss, Amanda Reed, tall, polished, and permanently smug, was showing something on her phone to the rest of the team. They huddled around her, whispering and giggling. When I got closer, my stomach dropped. On her screen was a photo of me, taken at last year's Christmas party. I looked tired, my makeup smudged, my dress a size too tight. Someone had edited it crudely, adding a speech bubble that said, "Maybe next year I'll get a raise if I bake cookies instead of working." They all laughed. Even Kevin, the one person I thought was my friend. Amanda noticed me and smirked. "Oh, Hilary, we were just admiring your party photo. You really do give try-hard energy, don't you?" The laughter grew louder. My throat burned. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Glad to see you're all entertained." Amanda tilted her head mockingly. "Don't be so sensitive, sweetheart. It's just a joke." Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. I wanted to vanish. The cupcakes on the table blurred as tears welled in my eyes. They thought it was harmless, but it wasn't. That photo represented every time they'd underestimated me, every time they'd whispered behind my back. When I returned to my desk, I saw another email pop up, this one from Amanda. The subject line, "Future Expectations." The message was short. "Hilary, your work lately hasn't been up to the team's standards. We'll need to discuss your position soon. No greeting, no closing, just a warning dressed as professionalism." That was Amanda's way. She never fired anyone outright. She made them miserable until they quit. As I sat there, staring at the screen, Kevin walked by and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't take it personally," he said, half whispering. "Amanda just likes to test people." "By humiliating them?" I asked. He hesitated. "Look, just keep your head down. She's got seniority. You can't win." He walked away before I could reply. That phrase, "you can't win," repeated in my mind all day. It wasn't just the office. That feeling of invisibility had followed me all my life. Growing up in rural Ohio, I was the middle child in a family where attention was currency, and I never had enough of it. My older brother, Ryan, was the golden boy, athletic, charming, the kind of person people noticed when he entered a room. My younger sister, Emily, was fragile and sweet, always needing protection. Me, I was the reliable one, the helper, the background character in everyone else's story. When I told my parents I wanted to study business management, they laughed. "You're not really the ambitious type, honey," my dad had said. "Stick to something simple." So I did. I built a quiet life, took a safe job, kept my head down. But deep down, I wanted more, to be respected, valued, seen. That day in the office shattered whatever scraps of confidence I had left. When the clock hit 5, I slipped out without saying goodbye. The autumn air outside was sharp, slicing through my thin jacket. I walked past glowing windows filled with people laughing over dinner, couples holding hands, lives that looked warmer than mine. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking. I dropped my bag on the couch and sat in silence, staring at nothing. My tiny apartment felt colder than ever. The cupcakes I'd taken home sat untouched on the counter, reminders of how naive I'd been. My phone buzzed. A message from Kevin. "Kevin, hey, sorry about earlier. Amanda can be intense. Don't let it get to you." I stared at the screen, the rage bubbling inside me. Don't let it get to you. Easy words from someone who laughed while I was humiliated. Me. Thanks for pretending to care. He didn't respond. I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling, Amanda's smug face replaying in my mind. I remembered how she'd taken credit for my project last month, how she'd dismissed my ideas in meetings, how she'd smiled to my face and stabbed me in the back the moment I turned away. For years, I'd let people like her define my worth, bosses, friends, even family. Always the quiet one, always the one who tried to please. But that night, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was recognition. They thought I was weak because I didn't fight back, because I smiled and kept working, because I never made a scene. But I knew something they didn't. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. It just means patient. As dawn light crept across my window, I made myself a promise, one I whispered aloud, just to feel the words take shape. I'll never let them decide who I am again. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost through the office, invisible but observant. I watched, listened, memorized. I noticed the way Amanda flirted with upper management, the way she falsified expense reports, the way Kevin forwarded confidential emails to her after hours. They thought I wasn't paying attention. But I was. The betrayal that broke me would become the foundation I built my revenge on. And someday, I promised myself, the same people who laughed at me would come crawling back. Not out of kindness, but out of need. That would be the day I'd finally smile again. At work, Amanda's laughter followed me like a shadow, but at home the silence was worse. My apartment had always been small. One bedroom, thin walls, the hum of a neighbor's TV seeping through. But lately it felt cavernous, like the world had stopped making space for me. I'd thought home would be my refuge. Instead, it became a mirror of every place I'd ever felt unseen. I could still hear my parents' voices from years ago, echoing in my head. "Hilary's fine on her own," Mom would say when relatives asked how I was doing. "Always has been," Dad would add, half smiling, half dismissive. That was their way of saying we don't worry about her. They never realized that being the one no one worries about means you're also the one no one notices breaking. Now, sitting on the couch with a microwaved dinner, I stared at my phone. No messages, no calls. Kevin hadn't spoken to me since that night in the office. The loneliness pressed against me like weight. The next morning, I drove out to my parents' house. It had been months since I'd visited, but part of me needed to remember where I came from, to see if the hurt started there. The Collins family home sat on a quiet Ohio road lined with oak trees. Same peeling white paint, same tired porch swing. My dad was in the driveway, fixing the lawnmower. He looked up when he saw me. "Well, look who finally remembered her family," he said. "Hi, Dad." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Your mom's inside. She's been baking." When I stepped into the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon hit me. Mom smiled over her shoulder. "Hilary, I thought you'd forgotten where we live. Just been busy." "Busy doing what? Still working for that lady boss of yours?" The word lady dripped with disdain, as if ambition in a woman were contagious. "Yeah," I said. "Same job." Dad came in, grabbing coffee. "Good. You need to keep that job no matter what. Steady paycheck, benefits. You don't want to end up like your brother, jumping around trying to find himself." I smiled tightly. They always found a way to turn the conversation into advice I hadn't asked for. As we ate, I mentioned the photo incident, half hoping for empathy. "My boss humiliated me in front of everyone. They made fun of me," Dad chuckled. "Well, that's work life. Toughen up, kiddo." Mom added gently, "Don't let them see it bother you. You've always been too sensitive." There it was again. Too sensitive. 2 words that had followed me from childhood. When Ryan made jokes about my weight, I was too sensitive. When Emily forgot my birthday, I was too sensitive. When my boss mocked me publicly, I was too sensitive. I felt my chest tighten. "You don't get it." Dad looked up from his plate. "You think the world owes you kindness? It doesn't. It owes you results." Something inside me cracked. "And what do you think I've been giving it? I work harder than anyone, and all I get is laughed at." Mom frowned. "Hilary, lower your voice." "No," I said, standing. "I'm tired of lowering everything. My voice, my expectations, my worth, just to make other people comfortable." They stared at me, stunned. I realized then that my family didn't see me as a person at all. To them, I was a background character who existed to keep the peace. I grabbed my coat and left before they could respond. The cold air outside felt like release. Driving back to the city, I couldn't stop replaying my father's words. Toughen up. Maybe he was right, but not in the way he meant. Maybe toughening up meant finally fighting back. The following Monday, Amanda called a team meeting. I sat near the back, notebook open, heart hammering. She stood by the whiteboard, smiling that polished smile. "We've had a great quarter," she began, "but we've also had some inconsistencies in performance." Her eyes flicked to me. "Which means some of us need to reevaluate our priorities." The room went still. Kevin avoided my gaze. Amanda continued, "Teamwork requires effort from everyone. If anyone feels this job isn't for them, now's the time to say so." I clenched my fists under the table. My cheeks burned. They all knew who she meant. After the meeting, she cornered me by the copier. "Don't look so gloomy, Hilary. I'm only trying to help you grow thicker skin." "Is that what this is?" I asked quietly. "Character development?" She smirked. "Call it whatever you like. Just remember who signs your paycheck." That night, back home, I sat in the dark, replaying her voice over and over. My father's, my mother's, Kevin's hollow apology. I realized I'd spent my entire life surrounded by people who mistook kindness for weakness. But I wasn't weak. I was observant. I began writing everything down. Dates, comments, projects Amanda had stolen, emails Kevin forwarded after hours, false reports she'd filed to upper management. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but documenting it felt like power. Weeks passed. The more I watched, the more I saw. Amanda wasn't just cruel, she was reckless. She manipulated numbers to inflate her department's success, took credit for others' work, and funneled company funds into client dinners that never existed. The more I uncovered, the more the fear faded. Each note I wrote became a brick in the wall I was building between who I had been and who I was becoming. Meanwhile, my parents continued their routine calls. Mom's voice was always cheerful, full of small talk. "Your sister just got promoted!" Or "Your father fixed the roof." But she never asked about my happiness. Only if I was managing, existing, surviving. But I was done surviving. One evening, Kevin approached me again as I packed up. "Hilary," he said, voice low, "Amanda's going after you. She's telling management you're uncooperative." I zipped my bag calmly. "Let her," he frowned. "You don't seem worried." "I'm not." As I walked out of the office, his confusion followed me like perfume. What he didn't know was that Amanda was digging her own grave, and I was simply taking notes. At home, I pinned every detail onto a corkboard. Names, dates, screenshots, receipts. My living room became a quiet war room. Looking at the wall, I whispered to myself, "You wanted me to be invisible, Amanda. Let's see how invisible I am when the lights are on you." Outside, the city buzzed with life. But inside, I finally felt alive for the first time in years. Because invisibility wasn't a curse anymore. It was camouflage. The morning I snapped began like every other. Gray sky, burnt coffee, and the dull ache of pretending everything was fine. I was standing at my desk, sorting files, when Amanda appeared in my doorway with a stack of folders in her arms. "Hilary," she said sweetly, "I need you to redo these reports. They're lacking detail." I looked up. "Those are the reports I submitted last week." "You already approved them," she shrugged. "Then consider this a learning opportunity." Her voice dripped with condescension. The same voice that had humiliated me in front of the team, dismissed my ideas, and made every workday feel like a performance I was doomed to fail. I took the folders without a word. As she turned to leave, she added, "Oh, and please finish them by end of day. I'd hate for corporate to see another mistake." When she was gone, I stared at the papers in my hands, the words blurring into nothing. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Something inside me shifted, quietly, permanently. That was it. No more swallowing my anger. No more waiting for fairness. No more apologizing for taking up space. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to end her. But endings required patience, and I'd already learned to wait. I spent the next week gathering everything. Every falsified expense report, every manipulated document, every email Kevin forwarded that included confidential data Amanda wasn't supposed to have. She'd gotten lazy, overconfident. She used company credit cards for client dinners that were actually luxury spa weekends. She had Kevin log hours for project collaborations that never existed, and I had proof. The hardest part wasn't the collection, it was pretending. Smiling through meetings, responding, "Yes, ma'am," when she barked orders, acting like nothing had changed, but everything had. At night, I'd come home, spread my notes across the table, and imagine the moment she'd realize the person she thought was harmless had outsmarted her completely. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday. Rain hammered against the office windows, thunder echoing like distant applause. I was wrapping up when Kevin stopped by my desk. "You busy?" he asked, glancing around nervously. "Always," I said. He lowered his voice. "Listen, Amanda told HR you've been missing deadlines. She's pushing for a formal warning." I felt the familiar sting of humiliation. But this time it didn't burn. It steadied me. "Thanks for telling me," I said calmly. He nodded, uneasy. "I don't know why she hates you so much." "Oh, I do," I said. "Because I remind her of who she'll never be. Honest." He blinked, unsure how to respond. That night, I stayed late. The office emptied, lights flickered, and the hum of computers filled the silence. I opened the shared drive and began organizing every document I'd gathered into one perfect folder. I labeled it Evidence Read Misconduct, screenshots, bank statements, emails, even a recording I'd secretly taken of Amanda mocking a client's disability at a dinner last month. It was brutal, incriminating, undeniable. When I was done, I copied everything to a USB drive and slipped it into my bag. As I shut down my computer, Amanda's voice echoed down the hall. "Still here, Hilary? Burning the midnight oil?" She walked in, heels clicking, a smug smile plastered on her face. "You're such a loyal little worker bee. I wish more people had your obedience," I smiled faintly. "I try my best," she leaned on my desk. "You know, if you stopped taking things so personally, you might actually go far here." I met her gaze. "You might be right." Her smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," I said, standing. "Just agreeing with you for once." She laughed and left, her perfume lingering behind like poison. When the door closed, I whispered to the empty office. "Enjoy your throne while it lasts." The next morning, I was up before sunrise. I brewed coffee, dressed in my cleanest blazer, and printed out copies of everything: the spreadsheets, the emails, the fake invoices. Then I drove straight to HR. The head of HR, Melissa, was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for discretion. "Hilary, good morning," she said when I walked in. "Everything all right?" I placed the folder on her desk. "Not really. I have something you need to see." As she flipped through the papers, her expression changed from mild curiosity to quiet horror. "These are serious allegations." "They're not allegations," I said. "They're facts." She looked up. "You understand that this could cause a full-scale audit?" "I'm counting on it." I left her office shaking, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared. I was awake. By noon, the whispers began. Amanda's office door stayed closed for hours. Kevin paced the hallway, pale and anxious. Then came the announcement. "Amanda Reed has been placed on temporary leave pending internal investigation." The word spread like wildfire. My inbox exploded with messages. Coworkers asking what happened. Others pretending they'd never liked her. I ignored them all. That afternoon, I found Kevin by the vending machine. "So," I said, "heard the news?" He swallowed hard. "You did this?" I smiled. I told the truth. "That's all." He shook his head slowly. "You're dangerous, Hilary." "No," I said softly. "I'm done being a victim." Amanda returned a week later, not as a boss, but as a cautionary tale. HR escorted her in to collect her things. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence stripped bare. When our eyes met, she sneered. "Happy now?" She hissed. I stood. "Not happy. Just free." Her lips trembled with rage. You think this changes anything? The corporate world eats people like you alive. Maybe, I said, but at least it'll choke on you first. She left without another word. The office felt lighter after that. People smiled again. Even Melissa stopped by my desk one morning. Corporate reviewed your report, she said quietly. They're offering you Amanda's position, interim manager, if you're interested. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Me? You earned it, she said simply. As she walked away, I sat there in stunned silence. Amanda's desk, her glass fortress of power, was empty, waiting for me. I stood slowly and walked to it. My reflection shimmered on the polished surface. For the first time, I saw not the quiet assistant, not the invisible girl from Ohio, but a woman who had clawed her way through cruelty and come out steel. I whispered to my reflection, "This is what happens when you push the wrong person too far." That was the day I snapped, not into pieces, but into power. The day after Amanda was escorted out, the office was eerily quiet. The laughter that used to echo from her corner was gone. No perfume trailing down the hall, no high heels clicking on the tiles, no snide remarks floating over cubicle walls. Just silence, thick, unfamiliar, liberating. I sat at her desk, my desk now, staring at the glass walls that had once symbolized her power. The morning sun cut sharp patterns across the floor, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. But peace has a funny way of feeling foreign when all you've known is survival. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. "Kevin, congrats on the promotion, boss." I stared at it for a long time before typing back. Me. I didn't take it for revenge. Kevin. Didn't you? The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments. I attended meetings instead of taking notes. I gave instructions instead of following them. The same people who had once overlooked me now leaned forward eagerly when I spoke. It was strange how quickly respect appeared once you held power. Still, the silence haunted me. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort but reminds you what you lost to get here. One evening, as I gathered my things to leave, Kevin appeared in my doorway. "Got a minute?" "Sure." He stepped inside, hands in his pockets. "Word is Amanda's threatening to sue the company. Claims she was framed. I didn't flinch. Let her try." He studied me. "You're different now, Hilary." "Good different?" I asked. He hesitated. "Depends on who you ask. What do you think?" He shrugged. "I think you're doing what you have to. Just don't lose yourself in it." I smiled faintly. "If I lost myself, Kevin, it happened a long time ago." He left after that, but his words lingered. Don't lose yourself. The problem was, I wasn't sure who myself even was anymore. Outside the office, life still felt like an empty stage after the curtain falls. I had achieved the justice I wanted. Amanda was gone, my name cleared, my position elevated, but the applause never came. At night, my apartment was too quiet. No laughter, no family calls, no friends checking in. I'd built my strength alone, and now I was left alone to enjoy it. Sometimes in the stillness, I'd hear my father's voice again. "Toughen up, kiddo." I used to think he meant survive. Now I realized he meant harden. Maybe that's what he'd done. Built walls so high that even love couldn't climb over them. I didn't want to be him. But I could feel the edges of his lessons cutting into me. One weekend, I drove back to Ohio. I hadn't planned to. I just woke up, packed a bag, and drove. The roads were lined with bare trees. The sky washed pale gray. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, Dad was sitting on the porch reading the paper. He looked up. "Well, look who decided to visit." "Hi, Dad." Mom came out with a dish towel in her hands. "Hilary, we saw the news." "You got promoted," I nodded. "Yeah, interim manager." Dad grinned. "That's my girl. Finally moving up in the world. It should have felt good. Pride. Validation. But it didn't." His words sounded transactional, like I'd only become worth something because someone else said I was. Over dinner, they asked about the office scandal, so, "This Amanda woman," Dad said between bites. "She got what was coming, huh?" I froze. "What makes you say that?" He chuckled. "Bullies always do. You just had to wait it out, Mom added softly. I always knew you'd land on your feet. I stared at them. No, you didn't. The table fell silent. You didn't believe in me when I needed it, I continued. You told me to toughen up, to stop being sensitive, to keep my head down. You didn't raise me to fight back. You raised me to endure. Dad sighed. Hilary, don't start. I'm not starting, I said, voice shaking. I'm finishing. You talk about bullies getting what they deserve. But when I was being crushed by them, you looked the other way. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We did our best. Maybe your best wasn't enough, I whispered. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it anymore. I pushed back my chair and stood. Thanks for dinner, Mom called after me as I grabbed my coat. Hilary, please, don't go like this, but I did. I drove away into the night, headlights cutting through fog, heart heavy but clear. That conversation didn't break me. It freed me. I realized then that closure doesn't come from getting apologies. It comes from deciding the apology isn't necessary anymore. Back in the city, things began to shift. Amanda's lawsuit threat fizzled when corporate released their audit results, confirming everything I'd exposed. She disappeared from the industry entirely. Meanwhile, I was promoted permanently. My salary doubled. People who once ignored me now asked for advice. I hired a new assistant, a shy young woman named Nora, who reminded me of myself. On her first day, I told her, "Don't let anyone make you feel small here." "If they do, tell me," she smiled nervously. "You sound like you've been through it," I nodded. "You have no idea." Over time, Nora grew confident. Watching her blossom filled me with something I hadn't felt in years. Pride without bitterness. Maybe that was the beginning of healing. One afternoon, as I left work, I got an email notification from an unfamiliar address. The subject line made my heart skip. From Amanda Reed. Subject, we should talk. My fingers hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part wanted to see what she had to say. I opened it. Hilary, you won. I hope it feels as good as you thought it would. Just know this. The people who stand on your shoulders will never remember your name. Enjoy your silence. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Her words didn't hurt. They revealed more about her than me. The silence she mentioned wasn't punishment. It was peace. For the first time, I realized revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need an audience or applause. It was simply the quiet knowledge that the story had turned, and I was finally the one writing it. The silence Amanda left behind slowly filled with something unexpected. Purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else's cruelty. I was shaping something of my own. But when you've been defined by pain for so long, learning to live without it feels confusing. Weeks turned into months. The company stabilized. I built a team I trusted, trained Nora to manage projects, and restored integrity where Amanda had left manipulation. People began saying my name with respect, but every time someone congratulated me, part of me still waited for the rug to be pulled out from under my feet. That feeling, that quiet dread, was familiar. It reminded me of growing up in my parents' house, where affection came with conditions and silence followed achievement. One night, after a long day of work, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old journals, college notebooks, and a single folded letter. It was a letter I'd written to myself when I was 18, the summer before college. Dear future me, it began. Please don't forget what it feels like to be small. Use it to grow. Don't let them tell you your kindness is weakness. Promise me that one day you'll stand tall and they'll have to look up to see you. I smiled bitterly. Somewhere between 18 and 29, I'd buried that version of myself, the one who still believed in hope. I wanted her back. The next morning, I arrived early at the office, the city still waking up. I sat by the window, watching the sunrise paint the buildings gold. Nora walked in, coffee in hand. Morning, she said softly. You're in early. Couldn't sleep. She smiled. You've been working non-stop. I don't really know what to do when I stop, I admitted. She hesitated. Can I say something? Of course. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You already did. Her words were simple, but they landed hard. For years, I'd been running on survival fuel, needing to prove, needing to win. But what if winning wasn't the end? What if it was just the beginning of living differently? That night, I called my mom. It had been weeks since our argument. The phone rang twice before she answered. Hilary? Hey, Mom? Her voice softened immediately. Oh, honey, I didn't think you'd call. I wasn't ready, I said honestly. That's fair. We talked for a while. Small talk at first about weather, work, and Emily's engagement. Then came the silence, the kind that only mothers and daughters share when both are afraid of saying the wrong thing. Finally, she said, Your father's been thinking a lot about what you said, I sighed. About not being enough? About how we failed you, she said. He won't admit it, but he knows. I didn't respond. Honey, she continued softly, you've always been strong, but strength can get heavy. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. Something in me cracked. I didn't cry. I just exhaled, long and deep, like I'd been holding my breath for years. Thanks, Mom, I whispered. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was connection, and that was a start. In the weeks that followed, I started making changes, small ones at first, taking weekends off, saying no to overtime, buying flowers just because I liked the smell. I even started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. One entry read, Maybe strength isn't about standing alone. Maybe it's about standing tall even when you let others in. It felt foreign, to be gentle with myself. To admit that I didn't have to be invincible to be powerful. Then something unexpected happened. Corporate announced an expansion project, new offices, new leadership roles. Melissa, the head of HR, pulled me aside after a meeting. I'm recommending you to lead the new branch, she said. You've proven your leadership. You've earned it. My heart raced. Are you sure? She smiled. Don't ask if you deserve it. You do. When she walked away, I stared out the window, watching a storm roll across the horizon. The thunder echoed something inside me. Not fear, but readiness. The night before the final interview for the position, I couldn't sleep. I drove to the old office building Amanda had once ruled from. It was quiet now, empty except for the faint hum of the security lights. Standing in that lobby again, I remembered how small I used to feel here, how Amanda's reflection on the glass walls had towered over mine. Now, it was my reflection that filled the space. I walked up to her old office door, my old office now, and placed a hand on it. You tried to bury me, I whispered. But you forgot I was a seed. The words weren't planned. They just came, and they felt right. The next day, the interview went flawlessly. The directors asked about leadership values, conflict resolution, long-term vision. I spoke honestly, not from textbooks, but from experience. I believe in second chances, I said. Not because people deserve them, but because we deserve to let go of the anger they leave behind. When it was over, the panel smiled. One of them said, You speak like someone who's lived it. I have, I replied simply. 2 days later, I got the call. Congratulations, Hilary. The new branch is yours. The words washed over me like sunlight after years of winter. That evening, I drove to a small diner on the edge of town, the same one where I used to sit during lunch breaks when I first started at the company. Back then, I'd sit in a corner booth with cheap coffee and dreams too fragile to say out loud. This time, I ordered a full meal and sat by the window. When the waitress came by, she smiled. Big day? Yeah, I said softly. The biggest. Outside, the rain started to fall. Not heavy, just steady, rhythmic. The world felt new again, washed clean. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about Amanda, my parents, Kevin, all the people who had shaped me through pain and indifference. And instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude, sharp but sincere, because every person who doubted me had unknowingly built the foundation I stood on now. I took out my phone, opened my notes app, and typed one last line for myself. The ruins they left behind became my blueprint. And for the first time, that didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like peace. The calm before a rise is never truly calm. It's just quiet enough for you to hear everything you used to ignore. The hum of fear, the whisper of doubt, the small voice asking, "Are you sure you deserve this?" That voice lived in my head the week before the new branch opened. The company had rented an entire floor of a sleek downtown building. Glass walls, modern furniture, a skyline view that made everything seem possible. It should have felt like victory, but for me, it felt like standing on a cliff with no railing. I arrived early on the first day. The elevator doors opened to the faint smell of new carpet and coffee. I walked through the empty office, fingertips grazing the desks that would soon be filled. My name was already on the glass door, Hilary Collins, branch director. I traced the letters with my hand, half expecting them to vanish. Just then, Nora walked in, balancing a box of supplies. "You're here early," she said, grinning. "Couldn't sleep," she laughed. "Big day nerves?" "Something like that." I helped her unpack, the morning light pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was strange how success could make you feel so exposed. I'd fought my way here, through humiliation, betrayal, and silence. But now that I'd arrived, I realized the higher you climb, the louder the echoes of your past become. When the rest of the team arrived, I greeted them one by one. Most were new hires, but a few familiar faces from the old office had transferred, including Kevin. He approached me cautiously. "Still weird seeing you behind the big desk," he said. I smiled faintly. "Still weird seeing you show up on time," he chuckled. "Fair enough." For a brief moment, it felt almost normal, like the weight of the past had thinned into something manageable. But peace, I was learning, was never permanent. A few weeks into the new role, things began to shift again. The pressure was relentless. Corporate wanted quarterly projections. The board demanded results. And beneath the calm surface, whispers of Amanda's fallout still circled the company. Some people thought I'd been ruthless. Others thought I was lucky. One afternoon, Melissa from HR called. "Hilary, got a minute?" "Of course." "There's something you should know," she said. "Amanda's back in the city. Rumor is she's consulting for one of our competitors." I felt my stomach tighten. "You're kidding." "Not at all. I don't think she's over what happened." "Let her stew in it," I said quickly. But even as I spoke, I could feel the unease creeping back. Amanda wasn't the type to stay buried. After the call, I sat at my desk staring at the skyline. The glass reflected my face back at me, older, sharper, calmer, but still carrying the faint tremor of old wounds. I wondered if Amanda felt the same when she saw herself fall. That night, I stayed late again. Nora had already left, and the office was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. I opened my laptop to finish a report, but my thoughts kept drifting. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stayed up baking cupcakes to impress coworkers, who flinched when people laughed, who thought silence was safety. I wanted to tell her she survived, that she didn't have to keep apologizing for being good, or kind, or human. But I also wanted to warn her. Revenge doesn't end when you win. It ends when you stop needing to, and I wasn't sure I had yet. A few days later, I attended a corporate networking gala, one of those events with too much champagne and too many polished smiles. Melissa had insisted I go. "You're the new face of leadership," she'd said. "It's time people see it." The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and chatter. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, answering questions about the new branch. It was going well until I heard a familiar voice behind me, one that made my pulse freeze. Well, if it isn't the company's new golden girl. I turned slowly. Amanda Reed stood there, glass of wine in hand, looking almost identical to the woman I'd destroyed, except for her eyes. They were colder now. Tired. "Amanda," I said evenly. She smiled thinly. "You wear power well, Hilary. Though I suppose I should thank you. Losing my job forced me to start over." Congratulations, I said. New beginnings suit people who needed endings. Her smile faltered. Still sharp, I see. Sharper than I used to be. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think you won, but you just joined the same game you hated. You sit at a desk and manage people who'll hate you in a year. You're not different from me. I met her gaze. That's where you're wrong. You built power by breaking others. I built it by surviving you, she smirked. We'll see how long survival lasts. I watched her walk away, the sound of her heels fading into the hum of conversation. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired, like standing over a battlefield after the dust settles, because Amanda wasn't wrong about everything. Success didn't erase cruelty. It just moved it to higher floors. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and drove to the river outside the city, the same spot I used to visit in college when I needed clarity. The air was crisp, the water still. I stood there, shoes sinking slightly into the wet grass, and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I prayed, not for revenge, not for validation, but for peace. Please, I whispered. Let this be enough. A gentle breeze brushed my face. The world felt quiet again, not heavy, not empty, just still. That was when I understood what this calm truly was. It wasn't the absence of chaos. It was the moment before transformation, when everything feels steady because you finally stopped running from yourself. I'd been chasing justice for so long that I forgot what it felt like to simply be back at the office. Things fell into rhythm. Nora excelled, the team thrived, and profits grew. But my revenge story was no longer about Amanda or the people who made me feel worthless. It was about the person I became because of them. Kevin stopped by one afternoon, leaning against my doorframe. You've changed a lot, he said. I looked up from my laptop. Good or bad? He smiled. Good, just different, like you're not fighting ghosts anymore. Maybe I finally buried them, I said quietly. He chuckled. Then you earned your peace. When he left, I looked out the window again, at the city that had once swallowed me whole, and realized I'd become part of it. Not lost in it, but rooted. The calm before my rise wasn't about waiting for what came next. It was about realizing I'd already risen, just by surviving what tried to bury me. And for the first time, that was enough. Revenge isn't always a plan. Sometimes it's a force that moves on its own, quiet, deliberate, inevitable. For years, I had carried it like a secret heartbeat, pulsing beneath my calm exterior. But as my career rose, something inside me shifted. Revenge stopped being about Amanda. It became about everyone who once decided I was nothing. That realization came one evening when I got a call from Emily, my younger sister. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Hilary, she said, her voice tight. Mom told me about your new job. Congrats. Thanks, I said cautiously. There was a pause. I was wondering if you could help Dad. He lost his job, I froze. What do you mean, lost his job? They let him go last month. Something about downsizing. He's been too embarrassed to tell you. I rubbed my forehead. Doesn't surprise me. Hilary, he's struggling. They're behind on the mortgage, so now I'm supposed to fix it? Emily's tone softened. You don't have to. I just thought you'd want to know. When I hung up, I sat in silence, my pulse drumming in my ears. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. The man who once told me to toughen up, who laughed when I cried about my job, who said the world owed me nothing, now needed my help. I should have felt satisfaction. But all I felt was a slow-burning ache. That weekend, I drove back to Ohio. The air smelled of wet soil and distant rain. Their house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint fading, the roof sagging slightly. Dad was sitting on the porch staring into space, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked up as I parked. Hilary. Hi, Dad. He shifted awkwardly. Didn't expect you? Emily told me, I said simply. He sighed. Figures. Mom came out, wiping her hands on her apron. Hilary, you look beautiful, sweetheart. Thanks, Mom. We sat in the living room, the air heavy with unsaid things. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. I guess you heard about the job. I did. He nodded slowly. 40 years, and they replaced me with someone half my age. That's life, huh? I tilted my head. That's what you used to tell me when I lost things. That's life. He looked down. Guess I deserve that. The silence stretched between us until he finally said, I'm proud of you, Hilary. I saw that article about your promotion. Proud? I said, my voice trembling. You never believed I could do it. He swallowed hard. Maybe I didn't know how to believe in you without feeling small myself. The admission stunned me. Mom reached over and touched his arm. We made mistakes, honey, but you've become someone extraordinary despite us. Despite. The word cut and healed all at once. I took a deep breath. You're behind on the mortgage? Mom nodded, embarrassed. We'll figure something out. No, I said softly. You won't, but I will. Dad frowned. We're not your charity case. It's not charity, I said. It's balance. I stood, pulled out my checkbook, and wrote an amount large enough to cover 6 months. When I handed it to him, his hands shook. He looked up at me, eyes wet. Why? Because I remember what it feels like to be powerless, I said. And I'm done letting pain define me. Driving back to the city that night, I realized that revenge didn't always look like watching others fall. Sometimes it looked like standing tall enough to lift them without sinking yourself. Still, Amanda haunted me. Her words at the gala, "You're not different from me," replayed in my mind. I wanted to prove her wrong, not just to her, but to myself, so I turned my focus outward. I started a mentorship program through the company, a support circle for women in toxic work environments. Nora helped me build it, and within months, we had over 50 participants. Each story reminded me of who I used to be: invisible, dismissed, underestimated. Helping them was the closest thing to peace I'd ever felt. One evening after a session, Nora lingered behind. You know, she said, you're kind of like a legend around here. I laughed. A legend? Yeah, the woman who brought down Amanda Reed and built something better in her place. I smiled. That's not the story I want to be remembered for. What story do you want? I thought for a moment. The one where I stopped needing revenge to feel alive. She nodded. Then you're already there. But fate wasn't finished testing me. 2 months later, I got an unexpected email from a journalist. Subject: Interview request. The rise of Hilary Collins M's. Collins, we're running a feature on women who turned workplace adversity into success. Your story is remarkable. Would you be willing to share it? Part of me hesitated. Going public meant reopening old wounds. But another part, the part that had once been silenced, wanted to speak. I agreed. When the article was published, the response was overwhelming. Emails poured in from strangers thanking me for telling the truth. Women wrote about their own Amandas, their own battles to be seen. But one message stopped me cold. From Amanda Reed, I read the article. You told it well. You left out the part where revenge tastes like guilt. You'll see, I deleted it immediately. Her bitterness couldn't touch me anymore. Or so I thought. A week later, corporate called an emergency meeting. Melissa's voice was grim. Someone leaked internal documents to the press, financial reports, staff evaluations. They're trying to make the company look unstable. My chest tightened. Do you know who? Not yet. But the source used your old login credentials, Hilary. The room went silent. My pulse spiked. That's impossible. I changed everything months ago. Melissa nodded. I know. We'll figure it out. Just stay calm. But calm was a luxury I no longer had. I knew exactly who it was. Amanda wasn't done after all. She was back. And she'd just made the first move. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city glowing beyond the window, my reflection staring back like a stranger. For years, I had believed revenge ended when you rose above your enemies. But now I understood something deeper. Revenge isn't a story with a final chapter. It's a cycle, and if you're not careful, it drags you back down to where it began. I poured myself a glass of wine, took a long sip, and whispered, if this is how she wants to play, she's about to remember who taught her the rules. Because sometimes, the calm before your rise isn't peace, It's the pause before war. The next morning began like a storm that hadn't decided how loud it wanted to be. I woke to a dozen missed calls and 2 messages from Melissa, all marked urgent. My heart raced before I even touched the phone. Melissa. Hilary, call me as soon as you see this. Corporate is spiraling. Melissa, again. It's worse than we thought. I called her immediately. What happened? Her voice was tight, rushed. The leaked documents were traced. They came from an encrypted IP, Amanda's. She still had old access through a partner company's portal. My stomach dropped. So it's confirmed? Yes, but there's more. She's accusing you of framing her years ago, claims you faked evidence back then to steal her position. I felt the world tilt. She's serious. Serious enough that corporate legal wants to interview you this afternoon. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd fought so hard to climb out of the dirt she buried me in, and now she was trying to drag me back down. I'll be there, I said finally, voice steady but cold. By noon, the building buzzed with whispers. People glanced at me as I passed, some sympathetic, others suspicious. Power was fickle like that. The same crowd that once applauded your rise will gather just as eagerly to watch your fall. In the glass conference room, the air was heavy. Melissa sat beside me. Across the table were 2 corporate lawyers and the head of compliance. One of them, a man in a navy suit, adjusted his glasses. Ms. Collins, we've received new allegations regarding your promotion and the prior termination of Ms. Amanda Reed. Do you deny any involvement in falsifying evidence against her? I looked him dead in the eye. Completely. Then you understand why we have to reopen the case, he said. Given the leak, the timing looks deliberate, Melissa spoke up. We already verified the old audit. Hilary didn't falsify anything. The lawyer nodded slowly. Still, optics matter. We'll need to review everything again. When the meeting ended, I sat there long after everyone left, staring at the empty chairs. Revenge had already taken its toll, and now it was circling back like a debt collector. That evening, I called my mother. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to hear someone who still believed in me. She answered on the second ring. Hilary? It's late. I know, I just needed to talk. What's wrong? I hesitated. Someone's trying to destroy what I built. Her tone softened. That woman from before? Yes, she's back. Mom sighed quietly. There will always be people who hate the way you rise, but don't let them drag you back into their mud. I'm trying, I said. Then stop trying, she said simply. Just stand. I closed my eyes. I wish it were that easy. It never is. But you didn't come this far to question yourself now. After the call, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the city beyond my window, the echo of her words. Just stand. The next few days were chaos. Corporate launched an internal inquiry. Every file I'd ever submitted was rechecked. Every email reread. People avoided eye contact in the halls. It felt like déjà vu, the same cold scrutiny I'd endured years ago, only now the stakes were higher. Then, one morning, Kevin knocked on my office door. Can I come in? Sure, he stepped inside, looking uneasy. I got a message from someone, claiming to be Amanda. She's threatening to release more documents if corporate doesn't fire you. My blood ran cold. She reached out to you? She reached out to a few people, he said. She's trying to build a case that you ruined her career. I clenched my jaw. And what do you believe, Kevin? He met my eyes. I believe you, but I also believe she won't stop until she's satisfied. Then she'll die unsatisfied, I said. He nodded grimly. Then let's make sure of it. We spent the next week quietly gathering proof. Nora helped too. She was brilliant with data, methodical, precise. She traced Amanda's false claims to a consulting firm that had recently been blacklisted for privacy violations. Every file, every timestamp lined up perfectly to show manipulation. When Melissa saw the report, her eyes widened. Hilary, this is airtight. This clears you completely, I nodded. Good, because I'm not stopping there. Melissa frowned. What do you mean? I'm not just clearing my name. I'm ending hers for good, she hesitated. Be careful, Hilary. Careful is what let her get away with it the first time. The next morning, I called the journalist who had interviewed me months ago. "This is Hilary Collins," I said. "I have another story for you, one about corporate sabotage and obsession." He sounded intrigued. "Are you willing to go on record?" "Yes," I said. "Everything I'm about to give you is verifiable." I sent him the files Nora compiled, the connections between Amanda and the consulting firm, the forged access credentials, even the leaked communications proving her intent to defame me. 2 days later, the article went live. Former executive Amanda Reed accused of cyber retaliation in ongoing corporate feud. Investigations reveal pattern of digital harassment targeting Hilary Collins, current branch director. The piece spread fast. News outlets picked it up. Online forums buzzed. Amanda's name trended again, not as a victim, but as a villain. That evening, as I left the office, Melissa called. "She's issued a public statement. She's denying everything." I laughed softly. "Of course she is." "But the board's seen the evidence," Melissa added. "They're filing a restraining order. You're in the clear, in the clear." 2 words that should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like exhaustion. That weekend, I drove back to Ohio again. My father was in the backyard, repairing a fence that no longer needed fixing. He looked up when I approached. "You look tired, kiddo." "I am," he nodded. "You win?" I smiled faintly. "If you can call it that." He leaned on the fence post, studying me. "When I lost my job, I thought pride was what kept me standing. Turns out it's what knocked me down." I met his eyes. "So what keeps you standing now?" "Knowing when to stop fighting battles that don't deserve my time." His words hit harder than I expected. Maybe that's what I needed to hear. That night, I sat on my childhood porch and watched the fireflies drift through the darkness. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, just stillness. Amanda's pride had finally collapsed under its own weight. She'd burned every bridge she tried to cross back over. And me? I wasn't the woman who needed to watch her fall anymore. Because revenge isn't truly complete when your enemy loses. It's complete when you no longer need them to. The fall of her pride wasn't my victory. It was my release. It's strange how the world has a way of circling back. When I thought my story with Amanda was finally over, I realized life wasn't finished teaching me about pride, pain, and what it truly means to rise. A few months passed since the article dropped. Amanda vanished completely. No job, no LinkedIn updates, no whispers in the corporate grapevine. She was a ghost haunting her own ambition. My name, on the other hand, became synonymous with resilience. I started speaking at leadership panels and mentoring programs. People quoted my story like a fable about survival, but I knew better than anyone that behind every triumph is a shadow. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting with Nora when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I silenced it, intending to call back later, but she called again. Then again, I excused myself and answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom, what's wrong?" Her voice trembled. "It's your father." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He collapsed at work. They're saying it's a mild heart attack. He's stable, but—" "Hilary, we need you!" The words hit like a punch. For a moment, I couldn't move. The last time I'd seen him, he was mending a fence that didn't need fixing. Proud, stubborn, unyielding. And now, he needed me. "I'm coming," I said. I drove through the night, headlights cutting through the rain. By the time I reached the hospital, the sky was still gray with dawn. Mom was sitting in the waiting room, eyes red, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. She looked up when she saw me. "He's in recovery. They said it wasn't severe, but he needs rest. He won't listen to anyone." I hugged her, something I hadn't done in years. Then he'll listen to me. Inside the room, Dad looked smaller. The man who once towered over every argument, every childhood disappointment, now looked fragile beneath hospital sheets. Tubes ran from his arm to a monitor that beeped softly, the sound steady and surreal. He opened his eyes and managed a faint smile. "Hilary, you didn't have to come all the way here." "Yes, I did." He tried to sit up, wincing. "I'm fine." I pulled the blanket higher over his chest. "You always say that when you're not." He chuckled weakly. Guess you inherited that from me. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that holds a lifetime of words. I read about that article, he said finally. They made you sound like a hero. I'm not, I said. I just stopped letting people walk over me. He nodded slowly. I should have taught you that sooner. His voice cracked on the last word. I looked at him. The man who had once dismissed my dreams, who had mocked my sensitivity, who now looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You taught me plenty, I said softly. Just not the way you think. He smiled faintly. I guess I did. The next few days were slow. Between doctor visits and medication adjustments, I stayed by his side. Mom fussed over everything. Blankets, food, nurses, and I realized how much she'd aged. The woman who used to bake cinnamon rolls and hum in the kitchen now moved with the carefulness of someone afraid life might break her next. One evening, as the three of us sat in the hospital room, Dad turned to me. I never told you this, he said. But when you left for the city, I kept your college acceptance letter. The one you thought I threw away, I blinked. You what? He smiled sadly. I tore up a copy. The real one I kept. It's in the drawer of my old desk. I couldn't admit it then, but I was proud. Scared too. Scared you'd outgrow me. Guess I was right. My throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because pride is louder than love sometimes. Mom touched his hand. Not anymore. The tears I'd held back for years finally came. I leaned forward and hugged them both, the weight of resentment lifting, replaced by something quieter. Understanding. For years, I thought I needed revenge to heal. But sitting there, surrounded by heart monitors and apologies, I realized what I really needed was closure. A week later, Dad was discharged. I stayed a few extra days to help them settle back in. We spent mornings drinking coffee on the porch, talking about small things, the weather, the neighbors, the garden. Nothing profound, just human. One afternoon, as we watched the sunset, Dad said, I don't deserve how kind you're being. I smiled. Maybe not, but I'm not doing it for you. He chuckled softly. For who then? For me, I said. Because I don't want to be like you, letting pride destroy the people I love. He nodded, eyes glistening. You're stronger than I ever was. No, I said gently. Just different. Before I left, Mom handed me an envelope. Your father wrote this the night after you visited last time, she said. I unfolded it later that night, sitting in my car before driving back to the city. His handwriting was shaky but deliberate. Hilary, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I see you now. All of you. Not the quiet girl I ignored, not the assistant I underestimated, but the woman who built herself from ashes. You've done what I never had the courage to do. Face your pain instead of burying it. If I could go back, I'd tell you this sooner. You were never too sensitive. You were just human, and I should have been one too. Love, Dad. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears sliding down my face. The ache that had lived inside me for years finally softened. When I returned to the city, Nora greeted me with flowers. Welcome back, boss, she said. You look lighter. I think I am, she smiled. The new mentorship group starts tomorrow. Still want to lead it? More than ever, I said. That night, I walked through the quiet office. The skyline glittered beyond the glass, and for once, I didn't see success. I saw peace. Every decision, every heartbreak, every betrayal had led me here. As I turned off the lights, I whispered, they needed me once. But I needed this, the proof that I survived them. The hum of the city answered softly, like applause meant only for me. It's funny how life looks different when you finally stop surviving and start living. For so long, I believed my story was about revenge, about proving them wrong, making them regret underestimating me. But standing here now, years later, I understand something I never did before. The real revenge was becoming someone I could finally respect. My name is Hilary Collins, and I'm not who they left behind. When I walk into my office now, it doesn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It feels like a legacy. The walls are covered with photos of the women I've mentored. Smiling faces, stories of triumph, reminders that I didn't just climb the ladder, I built a new one. Nora still works with me, though she's no longer my assistant. She runs our mentorship foundation now, the Rise Project. We started it a year ago, and it's grown faster than I could have dreamed. We help women who've been silenced, overlooked, or broken down by people like Amanda. Every story we hear reminds me why I can't stop. Not because I'm angry anymore, but because I finally understand what power is supposed to look like. Power isn't dominance. It's compassion, anchored by strength. Last week, I got an email that made me pause. It was from an unfamiliar address. The subject line simply read, Amanda Reed. My pulse quickened. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Hilary, you don't have to read this, but I need to write it. I lost everything. Every friend, every client, every ounce of pride I once had. For a long time, I blamed you because it was easier than admitting I destroyed myself. You didn't ruin me. I did. I wanted to hurt you, because you reminded me of everything I wasn't brave enough to be. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you find peace, the kind I never will. Amanda, I stared at the screen for a long time. A few years ago, I would have printed that message, framed it, maybe even toasted to it. But now it just made me sad, because I understood her. Not the cruelty, not the manipulation, but the emptiness behind it. The desperation of someone who thought control was the same thing as safety. I never replied. Some apologies are meant to be carried, not returned. A few days later, I spoke at a women's leadership conference in Chicago. The ballroom was packed, rows of faces looking up at me, eyes full of hope, fear, determination. When I stepped onto the stage, I thought about that first day in the break room years ago, holding a tray of cupcakes, trying to belong. The humiliation that followed had once defined me. Now, it fueled me. 5 years ago, I began. I was sitting in an office where people laughed at me behind my back. I thought success meant becoming someone they couldn't laugh at. I was wrong. Success isn't about revenge, it's about peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop explaining your worth to people too small to see it. The crowd was silent. I saw heads nodding. Some women wiped tears. I used to think I had to fight every battle to prove I was strong. But real strength, I continued, is knowing when to put the sword down. When the applause came, it wasn't loud at first. It started as a ripple. One clap, then another, then a wave that filled the entire room. In that sound, I heard something I'd been chasing my whole life. Belonging. Later that evening, I returned to my hotel room, still buzzing from the energy of the event. I opened my journal, the same one that had followed me since college. Flipping through the pages, I found an entry I'd written months ago. I forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I smiled. For the first time, I believed it. As I wrote that night, my thoughts drifted to my parents. Dad had recovered well. He'd gone back to part-time work at the hardware store. Not because he needed to, but because he liked feeling useful. Mom had started gardening again. They called me every Sunday now, never to lecture or criticize, just to talk. Your father brags about you to everyone, Mom said once, laughing. Even the mailman knows your story. It used to make me uncomfortable. Now it just made me proud. A few months later, I visited them again. The porch hadn't changed, but I had. Dad sat in his favorite chair, reading the paper. When he saw me, his whole face lit up. Hilary, he said, you're just in time. Your mom made pie. I laughed and sat beside him. I didn't come for the pie. He grinned. Yeah, you did. We sat quietly for a while, watching the sunset. Then he said, you know, kiddo, I used to think success was about being the best. Now I think it's about sleeping well at night. I smiled. Then I guess I'm finally successful. He chuckled. You always were. Took me too long to see it. We didn't need to say anything else. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm. When I drove back home that night, the road stretched endlessly ahead, bathed in moonlight. I rolled down the window, letting the wind tangle through my hair, and whispered to myself, You made it. Not because I'd won, but because I'd learned when to stop fighting. Every betrayal, every cruel laugh, every lonely night had led me here, to peace, purpose, and a version of myself that no longer needed validation. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes the people who broke you don't need punishment. They need to watch you live beautifully without them.